Job did get his satisfaction. Quote, "This is I, the creator of all the ungovernable, ruthless forces of nature, which are not subject to any ethical laws. I, too, am an amoral force of nature, a purely phenomenal personality that cannot see its own back." In spite of his impotence, Job, the man, is set up as a judge over God himself. Edinger says, "It is a symbolic description of the dawning of a transpersonal dimension of consciousness that has the power of redemption. It demonstrates that what we previously said, that God's ethics come from man's conscience." In paragraph 607, the poet ends the story when Job prostrates himself. A relativization of God was utterly unthinkable at that time and remained so for the next 2,000 years. The writer of the Job story, at some level, got this, right? Even if unconsciously, he kind of got it. But then it didn't really come into consciousness for 2,000 years. Paragraph 608, the unconscious mind of man sees correctly even when conscious reason is blind and impotent. I think that that's an important concept, that the unconscious mind of man sees correctly even when conscious reason is blind and impotent. You know, when you have a hunch about somebody, you probably ought to pay attention to it. When something doesn't seem right, you ought to pay attention to that. Yahweh's dual nature has been revealed, and somebody or something has registered this fact. Such a revelation, whether it reached man's consciousness or not, could not fail to have far-reaching consequences, and it comes to full consciousness in the work of Dr. Jung. So, you know, that's the point. That's why he's a seminal person in history, because he was the first one to get it, to understand it in some way. Just reading from Edinger's Creation of Consciousness. In my opinion, Answer to Job has the same psychic depth and import as characterize the major scriptures of the world religions. Tremendous change in the God image. Okay, so I actually read these things when we started, but quoting Jung, "I am not addressing myself to the happy possessors of faith, but to those many people for whom the light has gone out, the mystery has faded, and God is dead. For most of them there is no going back, and one does not know either whether going back is a better way. To gain an understanding of religious matters, probably all that is left us today is the psychological approach. That is why I take these thought forms that have become historically fixed, try to melt them down again and pour them into molds of immediate experience." Edinger says, "The psychological approach to religious imagery is not available at any depth to one who is contained in a particular religious myth." And then Jung says, I do not write for believers who already possess the whole truth, rather for the unbelieving but intelligent people who want to understand something. Without the psyche, you can neither know nor believe. Therefore, everything about which we can speak at all lies in the psychic realm. Even the atom is in this sense a psychic model, which it is, right? You accept that?
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
But you know, you could say that about a lot of things besides religion. You could also say 19th century physics, where they thought they believed that they were just within, you know, days practically of having the complete solution to physics in the world.
And they still don't.
And then Einstein walked in. So.
Right. And none of them can combine the cosmology with, microphysics. The unified field theory, what is that? It's combining
Electrical and gravitational,
Yeah, something like that.
all forces
Right.
unified.
Unified forces. They can't explain
One
it.
universal force that explains all the forces that we have.
Right.
Is that the theory of everything? Or is it
Yeah, it's,
No, that's a unified field theory.
No, that's
well,
something.
there, yeah, that's what we're talking about, the unified field theory,
Unified
which
field.
which brings the macro together with the micro, and they can't do that yet. They haven't been able to.
Well, they've got two models and they can't get them to fit together. So,
Yeah, yeah, they have two, so they need a different
but they're
model.
gonna do it with quantum. So,
Oh, yeah, it's quantum mechanics,
Electromagnetic, gravitational.
quantum
unifying all
mechanics.
of that.
but they gotta shift out of their mindset. They gotta stop being believers.
Right.
So that
But-
they're open. They have to be non-believers.
Well, they have a duality, right? They have one thing and the other thing, and they need somebody to come up and create one thing that has everything in
the
it.
crust in the middle?
Our institutions aren't designed to foster that. Our educational system is not. It's get into your niche, write your papers, get your salary, get your prestige, get your Nobel Prize, and then die. It's not like,
Well,
It's not like-
look, it's
let's use
better.
our imagination.
That last
That last part, you know, that always gets. it's
period
like-
right on the stone
Yeah.
and die.
Well, look,
Trying
it's
to calm you
it's
down.
better. It's better than India. You know, the problem with education in India and places like that is they believe in rote memorization, and so they're teaching people things by rote, and they can't imagine. They don't have imagination.
Well, you can
You
see
know
that
what?
when you call a call center because they can't hear from the script.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had an educator.
Yeah.
He's this famous educator. I was a graduate student. We were in a seminar, and so we have all these faculty and everybody is sitting there around, you know, listening to this guy talk. And he basically talked about rote learning.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, you know, I made some comment about rote learning being, you know, that seemed to point. I mean, that just doesn't seem the way to go. You know, here I am coming along, Mr. Art Guy, and if I had to do anything by rote, I would just go out and kill myself. And this guy goes, "Oh, shut up! You're just a child." And
What group
Yeah,
was
he-
this?
this, huh?
What, is this a nationality that you were dealing with, or?
No, this was a graduate seminar.
Oh.
And this was an educator.
Well, it's about transcendence, right? And I now know about it,
Yeah.
which I didn't understand before.
But that's where I was.
but you have
following
to
my
ex-
hunch.
Right. You have to experience it to understand it.
Yeah, no.
The thing that always had me going was something I called the combat officer's phenomenon. I didn't know what that meant, right? But I'd been through all the training. I was a lieutenant colonel in the Marine Corps, but I knew all the training, but I was still afraid in combat. Okay, and I was still not, and I knew that there were people like MacArthur, like Patton, who would walk out in front of the front lines, and they would just stand there. They didn't care, and I said, "Wow, that just never happened to me." And I finally got it because it's an experiential thing, and I went to this seminar on Zen, believe it or not, and they were explaining what Zen is. And so if you're learning to type, as long as you have to figure out where the keys are, you can't type. It's only when you forget where the keys are. No, but it's only when you forget where the keys are that you can type, right? And that's the experience. It's like riding a bicycle too. Same thing. Okay, as long as you have to think about balancing and steering and pedaling, you cannot ride a bicycle.
That's
No
the
way.
flow. That's what
There you go.
the
That's
guy
it.
calls flow.
Malcolm Gladwell talks about in any specialty you have to have 10,000 hours
Oh yeah.
in it, and once you've completed 10,000 hours, then you can be it. And so, like Bill Gates, and Jobs too, right? But Bill Gates spent 10,000 hours in the computer center at the University of Washington in Seattle, and once he had done that, then he could invent the PC. Well, it's all about mastery. In that sense, it's all about mastery, right? Which is until you master something, you can't do it. So we're up to paragraph 608, and there's 758 paragraphs in this book. And
They all equally good?
well, I know that 751 to 754 are pretty damn good and very controversial. But
Focus on
Those
yeah,
are the last ones, the ending ones.
yeah, they're near the end. They're in the last 10.
The way Jung did it, just makes
Complete
perfect
sense.
out of it.
And
Yeah.
and Revelation does too.
And
When you get into the
It doesn't
Revelation
need to be
stuff.
a quote religious thing. It just needs to make sense.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. So Edinger's got a book called The Archetype of the Apocalypse.
I got that. I got
Yeah.
it. Well, it's on the reading list. But
Yeah.
I'll look up my book.
Right.
Did Jung handle that, or was that?
Oh yeah.
Oh,
Isn't that the end of Answer to Job? Is it
Yeah.
the end of
It's
that?
it's in the answer to Job.
Okay.
Yeah. So
That's
so
the
that's
Revelation
partially
part
in
of it.
here. Yeah.
oh.
But anyway, it was nice of Edinger to do all these annotations. It's like Buddhism. Buddha, by tradition, gave 84,000 teachings in his lifetime.
Was that the equivalent of a lecture?
Yeah,
Okay.
but in the 2,500 years since his lifetime, guys have been explaining what he meant. Right.
So why did Edinger do the Blake drawings book? I mean, was that?
I think
Doesn't
that
seem to.
at some point, Edinger must have had an aha moment. Okay, because I haven't seen these religious aspects of Jung explained as clearly by anybody else. Okay, everybody's, as you say, everybody's talking about something in the clockwork of Jungian psychology. But this is the first time, and I always knew that there was something that bothered me. I always knew that Jung had this father complex where he knew that his father had lost his faith and he had been a pastor. And then he had this vision when he was 11 of God
Relieving you.
Relieving himself.
Availing himself of.
revealing himself or relieving himself on the Cathedral of Basel. And so that shook him up, okay, as a young man, as a boy, okay. And I think he was trying to explain that to himself all his life, actually. And he became a psychiatrist, so he ran into lots of these imaging things going on in crazy people, right? At the Bergholzli, right? And people that were at that time incarcerated for things that we don't incarcerate people for anymore. But he was dealing with the most mentally ill, but he was seeing all this imagery, which was common among these people. And so he started to pull it together. And really, it was when he was 76 and he wrote Answer to Job that I think he finally pulled it together for himself. And, he said, I've landed the Leviathan, Answer to Job, because he finally got his mind around it all. And Edinger worked with Esther Harding, and she was a generation ahead of Edinger. And so I think that at some point between Jung's death and 1984, when he did those lectures, at some point in that period of time, the light came on and he realized this is what Jung was doing. Because I thought the things that he said in his lectures were just mind-boggling. Like, God fell out of heaven in 1500. Really?
Go look that up.
and also the statement, this finally came to full human consciousness in C.G. Jung. And now, as I read all of these books, I see exactly what he's talking about, and it makes complete sense. It ties the whole thing together, including all the things that you spin off into the boondocks with, because all those things like women who run with the wolves and gods in every man, goddesses in every woman. Okay, they talk about archetypes, but they don't pull this together. No way. I mean, it's like they explain what this vocabulary is, but they haven't.
Popular reading.
Pardon?
That's for popular reading.
Yeah,
This takes some investment to understand.
it really does. But once you understand it, then you say, oh my God,
Sure.
this is, he really put his finger in something here. I mean, Edinger did, as the explainer of Jung. I mean, I think, you can tell the pioneers by the arrows in their chest.
I remember seeing the image of Job at the end with the multitude of animals that he owns, and the animals in the foreground that are not asleep anymore, and this imagery of basically utopia.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but he had to really be still harboring like murderous intent against Yahweh, don't you think?
Well, no, it's awakeness. Do I have murderous intent toward God now? Why would I? I mean, I've gotten to live in the 20th and 21st century. And that's been an amazing experience.
But you didn't have boils. It's the
Yes, I
boils that are
did.
the deal breaker.
I had a few things. Let me tell you.
All right.
That's
Let's
what
just
you
go
need
too
from your
far.
doctor.
But a lot of people skip. You lose children, that's a lot of them become unreligious after things like that happen.
I know, because they think God is supposed to be good, and God
Yeah.
isn't supposed to be good, right? My brother died from mountain spring water in Vail, Colorado. No kidding, okay? No kidding. They make Coors beer out of that shit. No kidding.
You
Okay.
say your brother died?
My brother lived in Vail, Colorado, and one summer he was up there in the summer working construction. He was a ski instructor in the winter, but in the summer he'd work construction. And in the summer of 1973, the water table in the water treatment plant for Vail fell down below the intakes for the plant, and so they couldn't get the water from the Colorado River into the plant for water treatment. So what they did was they took water buffalo, which are these trailers that are a tank, and they'd go around and fill them up with water out of the Columbia River, or out of the Colorado River, and bring it around into town, and people would go get their water, and they never warned them, and so it has Giardia in it, Giardia. And so this got in my brother's colon originally, and it worked its way up over 15 years into his liver, ate his liver. So in 1988, he had three liver transplants in one summer and died.
So he was exposed at Vail, and then 15 years later he
So
died.
just kind of incubated all that time, or just was
Yeah,
it
it just works its way up. It's an amoebic infection, and it just, it gets into your colon, and then it works its way up through your system until it destroys something that's vital. And in this case, it was his liver, and that actually started the liver transplant industry, because Thomas Starzl, the doctor, was at the University of Colorado doing liver transplants with pigs experimentally, right? And then all of a sudden he started to have all these patients coming in with liver problems, and they had all been in Vail. And he says, okay, what's wrong with what's going on in Vail?
What year was that?
73.
I was in 71.
And yeah, be thankful you weren't there that summer, because everybody that was in Vail that summer
73,
has
I left
probably
school,
died
I
by
went
now.
to engineering school.
Everyone either
University.
had a liver transplant or died.
Yeah, that's terrible, Skip. That's such a
That's awful.
freakish thing.
Yeah,